Welcome to this explainer. I gotta tell you, as a historian who spent way too many nights staring into the dark, shadowy history of Fastnet Rock, this one really gets under your skin. Today, we're unpacking the parable of the tide-bound ledger. It's this incredibly dark piece of maritime folklore about a soul being literally swallowed whole by the exact institution that was supposed to save lives. So what happens when a sacred calling becomes an eternal prison? It's a chilling thought, right? This question totally haunts the churning waters around Fastnet Rock, or Ireland's teardrop, as sailors used to call it. You know, back in the Victorian era, having a professional calling was basically held up as the ultimate moral ideal. But this parable, it rips the mask off that ideal to show us a terrifying underbelly. We're diving into a story where absolute devotion doesn't lead to salvation, it leads straight into an inescapable nightmarish trap. Just to really set the mood, before we meet our tragic main character, listen to this quote from the sources describing the unnatural tools used on this rock. Ink made of seawater and shadow. Wow. I mean, that haunting line just instantly nails the eerie atmosphere and the intense psychological dread we're about to get into. This isn't just your standard campfire ghost story. We're talking about deep, physical, and spiritual corruption, where the literal ocean and the dead of night are weaponized against a person. It creates this creeping dread that just kind of seeps right into your marrow. Okay, so the whole thing kicks off with this solitary lighthouse keeper, and his one overwhelming obsession was seeking to master the storms. He wanted to be the absolute most diligent servant Fastnet Rock had ever seen. But the thing is, right beneath all that diligence was just paralyzing, cold dread. He was absolutely terrified that just one moment of exhaustion, closing his eyes for a split second or dropping a single match, would cause a massive shipwreck on the jagged rocks below. The sheer weight of those potential lost lives, it literally weighed on him every single waking second. So desperate to be this flawless guardian, the guy basically hits the absolute limit of his mortal endurance. And in that peak moment of desperation, staring out into the pitch-black abyss of the sea, he reaches out to the darkness for help. The folklore says he whispered a plea right into the churning foam, begging the ancient gods of the deep. And get this, he didn't ask for wealth, he didn't ask for fame, he just begged for the sheer endurance to never, ever leave his post. And, well, to his ultimate doom, the darkness actually answered him. The gods answered with what the texts call a sacred, suffocating pact. But we're not talking about some paper contract here. No, these entities of the deep granted him this incredibly sinister artifact, a pen carved entirely out of salt-crusted bone. And the terrifying magic of this pen? It literally never runs dry. It just perpetually weeps that ink we talked about earlier, that ink made of seawater and shadow. It's so messed up because it's a gift designed for one thing only, to fuel endless, agonizing labor. Armed with his grim new bone pen and this unnatural endurance, he gets to work. His main tasks: 1. Log every single wave in the ledger. 2. Constantly polish the lantern's brass. And he did this with a terrifying rhythmic precision, day in, day out. Storm after storm. The true tragedy here is that he falsely believed all this absolute, punishing devotion would eventually buy him a peaceful retirement on a warm, sunlit shore. He really thought, if I just work hard enough, I'll pay my dues and get out. But let's look at how this plays out on a timeline, because it turns into pure tragedy so fast. Day 1, it's all about absolute devotion to the rock. But fast forward 20 years, the physical toll is horrifying. The sources actually say his skin grew pale and translucent. He is literally fading away, losing his humanity to the daily grind of this machine. He figures out way too late that the gods didn't care about his fading life at all. They only valued his perfect service. Finally, we hit the final hour. His mortal body just gives out and his heart ceases to beat. Now here's the comparison that really twists the knife. The keeper's hope was that death would finally be the end of his shift, right? Bring on that peaceful retirement on the sunlit shore. But the gods' reward? Yeah, they didn't grant him rest. In this sick, horrific twist, they just transitioned him into a prisoner of his own devotion. In their eyes, he wasn't dead, he was just promoted to the permanent staff. That massive ledger he had spent his entire mortal life obsessively filling out, it turns out it wasn't some record of time served that he could just cash in for freedom. As the text states, it became a monument to a thankless vigil. This enormous, endless book now required his unquiet spirit to just keep that seawater ink flowing forever. Even in death, the guy is literally tethered to that salt-crusted bone pen. He's bound to the desk, bound to the rock, and entirely bound to the duty. But it gets worse, because his terrible afterlife isn't just stuck in the ledger room. The folklore tells us he's fated to stand out on the lighthouse gallery during the absolute peak of the worst storms. And when he's out there, the safety of the lighthouse beam actually changes. Instead of a warm, warning glow, the light starts pulsing with this sickening, vibrant green. This corrupted color is basically the ultimate sign of his complete spiritual damnation. It turns from a beacon of hope into a literal beacon of doom. At this point in the parable, the lighthouse isn't saving anyone anymore. It's morphed into a predatory, soul-consuming machine. When you see that green light pulse, his terrible new duties kick in. He has to watch the stormy horizon, recruit the next soul, and feed the eternal cycle. He's not warning ships away, he's forced to ensnare new victims. He has to find someone else whose devotion can be twisted just to feed this eternal churning loop of the lighthouse. Now, pulling back the veil of the supernatural for a second, which, as a historian, I just have to do. Let's look at who these ancient gods of the deep really are. They aren't literal sea monsters with tentacles and scales. They're actually this profound metaphor for the soulless Victorian industrial machine. They perfectly represent the predatory nature of Victorian institutions and their absolutely soul-crushing labor expectations. The institution doesn't see a human being, it just sees a mechanical, totally replaceable part. This whole parable is really a grim reflection of a very real anxiety from that era. Our sources call it the weight of the past. It dives right into this deep Victorian fear that your professional calling, the exact thing society claimed gave you all your worth, could so easily turn into a suffocating eternal burden. It's that sheer horror of realizing the system you are literally sacrificing your life for has absolutely zero intention of ever letting you go. Because this predatory institution doesn't offer salvation, and it for sure doesn't offer rest. Instead, it offers what the source brilliantly calls a nightmarish mercy. It's this incredibly twisted grace that saves the living, but only to consume them as a mechanical part of a soulless loop. It keeps you functioning, right? It keeps your pen moving, keeps the light turning, but it strips away absolutely everything that makes you human. It just leaves behind this unquiet remnant of who you used to be. So as we wrap up this dark explainer and leave the stormy, shadowed shores of Fascinet Rock behind us, I really want you to think about the systems and the callings in our own modern world. I mean, the Victorian machines might be rusted away, but those crushing expectations, they're often still around. So I'm going to leave you staring into that sickening green light with the ink of seawater and shadow drawing on the page and ask you this one haunting question. Are you a prisoner of your own devotion?